Hello, today is Monday, January 13th, and welcome to episode 401 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Jessica Jones, and I'm joined by my co-hosts on NSI, Fault Lines, Martha Miller and Morgan Vina. Welcome back, Morgan. We missed you on our kickoff episode last week, and our special guest today, NSI Senior Fellow Amy Mitchell. Today, we're continuing, in some ways, part of our conversation on Friday. We're looking at President-elect Donald Trump's recent comments about Greenland and Panama. If you've missed the headlines, Trump has recently expressed a renewed interest. He did this also during his first administration in acquiring Greenland, citing its strategic importance, abundant natural resources. He suggested that it would help counter Russian-China's influence in the Arctic region. He's also, in addition to talking about Greenland, discussed raising the desire for the U.S. to regain control over the Panama Canal. He's argued that American oversight of the canal is crucial for both economic and national security reasons, particularly to counteract China's growing influence in global trade. For both Panama Canal and Greenland, he has not ruled out military action to take control. He's obviously raised some eyebrows and, seen some criticism and rebukes from some world leaders in response to comments about both. So I want to talk to you guys. First team, Martha, I'll go to you first. What do we make about these statements? Should we take them at face value, or are they just to generate some headlines?
So I think, as people have probably started to figure out by now, Trump frequently starts with outrageous or provocative statements to grab attention and, in my opinion, initiate discussion. This tactic, often shifts the debate and sets the stage for an outcome that is certainly, less extreme, and at the same time still achieves significant goals for U.S. interests. And so, I think at the same time, he is addressing some real national security concerns given the interest that China has demonstrated in both Greenland and Panama Canal, where they control the entry points to the canal through, in addition to building some extra infrastructure. So I think, yes, we take him seriously. Everyone should take him seriously. I think the question is, no, he's not going to send troops to Greenland. I can't imagine that. And I think for Denmark in particular, that's a tricky situation. It's a very important U.S. ally. We're a very important ally to them. And at the same time, Greenland is seeking independence, not for the first time, and they may actually get independence. And I think the other thing is, we are basically guaranteeing Denmark's security along with Greenland's already through NATO. So he actually has a pretty strong starting point there. So we'll see how this unfolds.
Amy, do you agree with Martha? This is kind of the opening salvo in negotiations. And to Martha's point, she raises NATO. What, if any, does this, how does this impact, a new administration's relationship with our, friends and partners?
Well, I agree with Martha that this is, typical Trump kind of throw out the outrageous statement, but it is an effective method that he uses. It gets people to the negotiating table, as we've seen with Denmark already. And I think you're going to see that across the board with most of his foreign policy and national security in the coming 4 years, where he's going to, for example, with NATO, demand that they meet the 4% again, if not higher. I've read up to 10%, which will be almost impossible for the majority of NATO countries to meet. And I think he recognizes that there is growing Chinese influence, not just in Panama, but throughout the Western Hemisphere. And the last 4 years have been overlooked. We really kind of let China take the lead in most of South America. And you saw that at the recent summit that Biden attended in November, where he was essentially snubbed. And she, General Secretary Xi got kind of all the accolades and the reception. So I think we do need to pay attention to this, as outrageous as it is. And I think most of us kind of probably, do the inner laugh when you see the picture of the American flag planted in the middle of the Panama Canal. But we also have to remember, part of the canal's problems are, it's really kind of falling apart. And how do we address that right now? Um, that would be, I think, the end game here is to make sure that the canal is updated, is uh, safe, etc., and not let the Chinese kind of further expand that footprint. So, maybe we see Trump, tweeting that he's going to hold a global competition to fundraise and design a new Panama Canal that will be named the Trump Canal.
Headline grabbing.
From the Gulf of America.
First proposal, Amy Mitchell. Okay, Morgan, can you tell us a little more about some of these security concerns? I know, we talk about on fault lines, like what should we be worried about? And especially when it comes to South America and the Panama Canal and maybe this global proposal competition. Amy's got one idea. How do we start to find opportunity there for the U.S. to, to counter China?
So I do think it's interesting here that, President Trump has listed two countries that aren't necessarily on Americans' radar. Greenland, of course, is a territory, autonomous territory that's connected to Denmark, and of course, you've got the Panama Canal. These are two very important geostrategic locations for the United States. The United States has an airbase in Greenland. Space Force has a presence there. Clearly, Panama Canal is a very important transit for U.S. For commerce heading and leaving to the United States. And so when we look at the presence of U.S. adversaries, primarily, Russia and China in the Arctic, as well as, China's expanding footprint in Latin America, which I think has gone largely ignored. It is past time that the United States take a very hard look at both of these regions, primarily Arctic and Latin America, and figure out how we can maximize our influence in these areas. I would note that Martha has mentioned before that Trump takes a maximalist approach when it comes to opening negotiations. Look, it catches Americans' attention, right? Whether or not we're actually going to buy Greenland or militarily invade the Panama Canal, I know that is truly shocking and unconventional. I'm not saying that we should do that, but I'm saying that is capturing Americans' attention, and there will likely be movement when it comes to these areas.
Okay, stay tuned, guys. We'll see. I don't even want to do the less move of making predictions whether or not we invade either of those regions. So I'm not going to do that. Not a good omen. Thanks all. That's a wrap. Thanks so much to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us again on Wednesday, January 15th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check out our Monday faces there. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.